All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel, and we focus on great theories of everything, ancient and modern. Try to do deep dives into them so that you can figure out how best to use these things in your own life for your edification, your awakening to 5D consciousness, your formation of a holistic worldview, to fulfill your quest for better spiritual, physical, and mental health, and also for your paradigm shifting. Today is our 72nd video that we've done on the book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha from Dr. Daniel Ingram. And this is really kind of his summary of everything that he knows about Buddhism that he wants you to know. And he has done the time, both on the cushion and in the books, and even consulting with the ancient the custodians of the ancient tradition from various Buddhist traditions, but especially the Theravada. He focuses on both concentration and insight meditation. Concentration meditation is really meditation on an object, and insight meditation is opening up to our 5 senses and our mental sensations, and investigating those sensations for the 3 characteristics, which are impermanence, dissatisfactoriness, and no self. So all of our sensations have those 3 characteristics, and as we begin to realize that, our brain becomes more efficient and our understanding of reality becomes more accurate. And we go through various stages of insight, which are similar to the states that we go through in concentration meditation as we are able to absorb or an object. But the insight meditation is ultimate for ultimate wisdom. And the concentration meditations really bring upon wondrous states and a lot of bliss, but they won't confer any type of ultimate wisdom. Now, he also talks about combining them together, and that's a caveat there. But we are in a chapter where he's talking about the different models of enlightenment that some of the different traditions have. What is the evidence of your enlightenment or your awakening or your ultimate wisdom? You become, free of thought, free of emotion. And now this section that we're about to start is called the radiance model. So this is kind of like, if you're enlightened, then you start to glow in the dark, or you start to become translucent. We'll see what he gets into here. Okay, so the section is called the radiance models. Related to the physical models are the radiance models, which involve imagining awakened beings will have a remarkable presence, radiating love, charisma, wisdom, peace, or even perceptible light. A friend of mine used to joke about this, saying that people practicing Western Vipassana in the Insight Meditation Society thought that an arahant would be someone like Dipa Ma, a talented practitioner of both Vipassana and Shamatha, that's insight and concentration, who was known for her kindness, strong concentration abilities, and psychic powers, who died an anagami by her own admission, but with light shining out of their ass. This is a bit of a humorous exaggeration, but it makes the point that these ideals are so ingrained in us from many traditions that it is hard not to imagine that enlightened beings must have something remarkable about them that you could feel or see. Everyone knows that all saints have light coming out of their heads, as did Jesus. You have only to look at medieval paintings of saints and saviors depicted with a nimbus or halo to confirm this. The stories of the Buddha are full of descriptions of his marvelous presence. In fact, his very first interaction with a human after his awakening went something like this. The newly awakened Buddha had gotten up after exploring the depths of his realization and abilities. He decided to go try to find his 5 companions who had been with him during his period of intense asceticism, and surveying the world with his psychic powers found they were at Benares. He took off walking down the road between Bodh Gaya and Gaya, and the first person the Buddha talked to after his awakening, who wasn't a god or a giant talking snake, was the monk Upaka. I quote the Buddha as he tells the tale as rendered in the English translation of the middle-length discourses of the Buddha. And as it is so priceless, containing such a wealth of information about the origin of these models and ideals. Upaka said, "Friend, your facilities are clear. Your faculties are clear. The color of your skin is pure and bright. Under whom have you gone forth, friend? Who is your teacher? Whose dharma do you profess?" The Buddha replied to the Upaka in the stanzas, "I am one who has transcended all, a knower of all, unsullied among all things, renouncing all, by cravings ceasing freed. Having known this all for myself, to whom should I point as teacher? I have no teacher, and one like me exists nowhere in all the world, with all its gods, because I have no person for my counterpart. I am the accomplished one in the world. I am the teacher supreme. I alone am a fully enlightened one, whose fires are quenched and extinguished. I go now to the city of Kasi to set in motion the wheel of Dharma. In a world that has become blind, I go to beat the drums of the deathless." Upaka replied, "By your claims, friend, you ought to be the universal victor. The victors are those like me who have won to destruction of taints. I have vanquished all evil states. Therefore, Upaka, I am a victor." That's it. The passage is remarkable in that it sets out so many criteria and specifics about what awakening means to the Buddha and to Buddhism in such a short space. Further, what is interesting is the number of times the word I appears. In fact, Buddha means something like awakened one, or I am awake. Thus, we see that the Buddha had no trouble talking about what he had done or who he was, nor did he have trouble thinking the thought I. While it is entirely possible that these are not the actual words or translated words of the Buddha, it still tells us much about how the early Theravada tradition viewed the Buddha and what he had done. We note his remarkable presence and skin, and so have the first of the Buddhist radiance models and physical models. We note that he says he is superior to the gods, which is sort of a god model in and of itself, except one better. He describes being free of all the taints and evil states, which is a complex mix of emotional and psychological models. He also mentions the drum of the deathless, and here we have hints of an immortality model or an extinction model. And while formally Buddhism would reject both of these associations, aspects of both show up often in the text anyway. There is also a transcendence model, as he says. He is unsullied by all things, and a specific knowledge model, as the Buddha says he is a knower of all. In short, he says he has accomplished something remarkable, and yet asserts that he is going to tell others how to do the same thing he did. Or is he? In case anyone is wondering, I'm a huge fan of the Buddha. I apologize if my parsing his purported and translated words through a hyper-analytic and reductionist postmodern filter comes across as disrespectful or in some other negative way. Might the Buddha's choice of words, metaphors, and similes have worked perfectly in that context, inspiring practitioners to excellent practice without undue confusion? This is entirely possible. However, today, as his words have come down to us translated into this cultural context over 2,500 years later, the results are often delusional chaos. I put textual selection and commentary here merely to demonstrate that we have lots of places in the Buddhist texts from which we can draw various conscious or subconscious models of awakening, not all of which are helpful. Still, the Buddha inspires the heck out of me, and you got to appreciate his purported moxie. I recognize that systems of thought and practice that may not be helpful in our current cultural context might have been very skillful and appropriate in another cultural or temporal context, and bringing the East to the West has shown this in abundance. The question of how the Buddha's realization relates to what he was trying to teach others is a complex one. There are numerous passages where he says he is quite different from and superior to all other awakened beings, and draws a clear line between himself and other arhats as well. Thus, we must look carefully at what his claims about himself have to do with others, and I devote the whole next chapter to this complex issue. Suffice it to say, the problem comes when the ideals the Buddha discusses as applying to himself are applied without careful investigation to awakened beings of theoretically inferior degree. I will leave off discussing the question of the Tibetans who purport to produce full tantric Buddhas in one lifetime, as that is beyond my pay grade. Back to the issues of whether enlightened beings have a special presence. I have seen examples of both, though I suspect that in some cases their presence was largely that way before they started doing spiritual practice. Many people who have asked me questions about practice over the years have reluctantly but seriously asked me if there was something remarkable about my presence or how I was able to keep my realizations hidden at work. I am both sorry and happy to report that I have no problems in this regard at work, and as far as I can tell, have nothing whatsoever that is unusual about my presence that wasn't there long before I got into all of this, other than the confidence and passion with which I speak on the Dharma, which I almost never do at work. Wearing specially tailored light-blocking undergarments keeps the rest in check. Seriously, the physical models and radiance can be another trap that people fall into, both in their own practice and when evaluating the possible level of realization of others. Okay, now this section is called the karmic models. Karma models involve the promise that somehow realization eliminates, exhausts, cancels out, or moderates the forces of causality that would cause bad things to happen to the realized being. Karma involves action and its consequences, and in its simplest form is essentially the statement that causes lead to corresponding effects in a lawful way. The subject is imponderable, as the forces and factors involved are so vast and complex that no mind can fully comprehend them. That said, many Buddhist and non-Buddhist models and ideals subtly or overtly present a vision of awakening that promises some sort of relief or freedom from worldly adversity. However, if we look at the life of the Buddha, who by definition is as awakened as you can get in Buddhism, lots of unpleasant events happened to him, at least according to the texts. He had chronic headaches and back pain, got illnesses, was attacked by bandits, and was the target of others' assassination attempts. His own order broke into warring factions, people harassed him, and on and on. Thus, even the Buddha, after his awakening, was not free from adverse experiences, and so it would seem naive to assume that we would be. However, the karmic models raise an interesting question, that of the timing of the fulfillment of the promises of awakening and what this has to do with death. The Theravada claims that the moment of complete freedom from suffering is at the death of the Arhat or Buddha, as it is only then that there is no more coming into further birth, and there is the complete cessation of the senses which cause pain and discomfort. However, the karma models can be used by a few non-hyper-literal, non-hyper-dogmatic people with real wisdom in a way that is neither destructive, overly simplistic, nor reductionistic. By seeing each thought, state, and emotion as it is, there is an increased ability to watch these arise and vanish on their own, thus allowing for their causal karmic force not to wash through to the future without some moderation of intelligence and wisdom. In this way, past causes, habits, tendencies, and the like can be mitigated through clear seeing, and the actions we take based on these that create future causes can be done with more awareness, clarity, and a broader, more inclusive perspective. This is not the same thing as eliminating all negative karma, but it is practical, realistic, and verifiable, and thus represents the truth found in the karma models. One of the most dangerous variants of the karma models are those saying that past a certain level of realization, awakened beings are not creating karma at all while yet still alive. While these traditions typically use a very specialized and subtle definition of karma, in most people's hands, this gets subtly interpreted as their actions having no possible bad consequences due to their level of awakening, a concept fraught with peril, creating the possibility of rationalizing all sorts of harmful behavior. If you are working in a tradition that uses this sort of model, take great care with it and remember training in morality, as the laws of causality still apply regardless of whether we conceptualize causality as karma. So that's the end of that section. I'm just going to opine a little here because I have a different interpretation of this, and I'm not sure how or where I got it, but I see the law of karma as basically the same as Newton's third law. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And I see he doesn't mention the real touchstone that I see with the karma models is that it's not that you eliminate generating karma, it's that you live down your past life karma so that you basically exhaust your past life karma. So whatever karma you generate, whatever happens to you as a direct result of what you've done in this lifetime. Now, for the previous lifetimes, that's how somebody like the Buddha or somebody who's whatever not creating karma can still have to deal with karma because they have not lived down their past life karma. But once you deal with your past life karma, then you can start to kind of ponder karma. Now, he talks about how one of the four imponderables in the Buddhist tradition is that it is karma, the workings of karma. But karma seems to be ponderable to me because it is just the Newton's third law. And then once I can see how your past life karma can be imponderable. But once you live down your past life karma, then you are able to be pretty much rational with the karma that's still around. Okay. I mean, I could be totally wrong about that, but that's just kind of my understanding. And I feel like you can live down your past life karma through, I wouldn't say sacrifice or self-sacrifice, but through repentance and self-sacrifice and trying to understand your karma, your past life karma, by investigating your parents to start with, what they, what you've inherited from them, and because you chose them in your bardo, your last incarnation, you chose your parents, and so that reflects some of your karma. And then if you can work on these things, then you can gradually, move beyond it. Okay, this section is called the perpetual bliss models. Perpetual bliss models focus on enlightenment, bringing about a state of continuous and uninterrupted happiness, peace, joy, or bliss. These are commonly found in Hinduism, though they also exist in full force in Buddhism, particularly certain neo-tantric schools and other traditions as well, such as in some systems that misinterpret Christianity's the peace that passeth all understanding. Buddhism often describes nirvana as synonymous with the highest happiness and the end of suffering. And this end of suffering is the natural corollary in many people's minds of the perpetual bliss models, which together with their corollaries are so pervasive in the world of awakening as to be a central, nearly unassailable tenet of most people's core beliefs. I'm sorry to say they need serious revision. The first point relates to impermanence. Bliss, peace, happiness, as well as their counterparts of pain, chaos, and misery are all transient phenomena subject to conditions arising and passing like the weather. As the Taoist saying generally attributed to Guangzhou declares, the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows march through our lives according to the laws of reality that have always been in place. This brings us to the great question of realization. Does realization change things, or does realization reveal how things always were? I advocate a modified version of the latter view, both for practice and for having sane models. But the dogma and those selling something often stray into the promises of a radically different and better existence. It is not that realization doesn't produce beneficial changes, as it clearly does, but I care about practice, and those who do insight practices while dogmatically averse to suffering do more poorly than those whose models allow embracing what is going on now. The standard Buddhist argument is that by removing the condition, namely ignorance or misperception, the suffering caused by this condition is also removed. The question then is how much suffering is caused by that specific condition, and how much suffering is caused by just being alive. I assert that a significant portion of our suffering is caused by simply being alive. Changing something in the relationship to the ordinary facts of life and humanity does help in global ways. The other side of the perceptual bliss models is the notion that by awakening, we will enter into a permanent jhanic state, such as the fourth jhana or some sort of nirvanic jhana. These versions of the bliss models imply perfect, continuous concentration untouched by circumstance and or enhanced by an inborn wellspring of jhanic qualities. As noted above, all the concentration states are temporary, not related directly to realization, attained by the awakened and unawakened alike, and thus are a false promise if added to a model of awakening, in which they become permanent states. However, as so many people get a taste of jhana and are sure this must just get better and more continuous as they progress, they end up cultivating these states again and again and get nowhere in insight practice. Further, why would someone who was hanging on to a bliss model want to investigate suffering? They won't. And so the chances are slim of them coming into real insight territory or handling the dark night well. Now, it is true that there is a relationship between the perspective on things that occurs in the first four jhanas and the four paths. For example, the panoramic perspective of both the fourth shamatha jhana and the panoramic perspective of arhatship share positive aspects, but they are not the same thing, and even mentioning these patterns and parallels is dangerous, as it can cause a lot of misguided effort and assessment of where people are on the path. I think that this is a good place to introduce the Indian Buddhist concept of the three kayas, K-A-Y-A-S, as it has some useful aspects that help make sense of these things. Okay, so this section is called the three kayas. Contrary to what some Tibetan Buddhists would tell you, Arhats have a deep understanding of what is meant by their teaching of the three kayas or bodies. For me, the three kayas are very close in meaning and implication to the scopes of the three trainings. Arhats understand the fullness of the implications of having been born and of their still being a body and mind relating to training in morality. All teachings of dependent arising, interconnection, and interdependence fall into the realm of the Nirmanakaya. I realize that this presentation is likely to seem forced and unsatisfying to those with deep formal Vajrayana training, given its fusion of concepts and terms across traditions that are a bit of a rough philosophical fit. However, I put it here to try to counter the tendency towards gross or subtle aversion in those practitioners from whatever tradition who wish to reject their ordinary body and life if they are in favor of the dream of being able to escape into more rarefied realms. A good tantric practitioner can work with whatever ordinary sensations arise, whereas a deluded, aversive practitioner may seek to find ways out of this ordinary world without embracing it properly or at all. A good Vajrayana practitioner will learn to see the ordinary as nothing other than deeply sacred and extraordinary. So said a very helpful Tibetan nun to me one day. Arahants and those with similar levels of realization know intimately the fullness of the ordinary realities of the human condition: sickness, health, sorrow, joy, conflict, harmony, pleasure, pain, clarity, confusion, stupidity, and brilliance. These manifest according to the same natural laws that have always been in effect, contrary to popular belief. A body was born and it will get sick and die. The 8 worldly winds of being happy or unhappy, respectively, in relation to praise and blame, fame and ill repute, pleasure and pain, and gain and loss still blow impersonally as always. The laws of biochemistry, physics, and physiology still hold. We still must pay taxes. Well, this guy needs to get red pilled. But he may be enlightened. But anyway, from a cynic's point of view, the Nirmanakaya is the most disappointing aspect of awakening. Did you really imagine that somehow it would be otherwise? Don't believe the hype. Another of the great Bill Hamilton one-liners was, suffering less, noticing it more. The more we wake up, the more we notice exactly what it means to have been born. The Nirmanakaya points to what is meant by this passage pertaining to the Arhat. The disturbances resulting from the taint of being can no longer be found here. The disturbances related to the taint of attraction can no longer be found here. The disturbances related to the taint of aversion can no longer be found here. And yet there remain the disturbances inherent in these 6 sense doors that are dependent on a body and conditioned by life. And this is from Sutra 121, the shorter discourses on voidness in the middle length discourses of the Buddha. Nothing that this says, 6 sense doors, Arhats still think, contrary to occasional myths about stopping thought, as noted before. While the content of thoughts is still inherently dual, the true nature of the way thoughts manifest is non-dual. Arhats know both aspects of thought directly, a bit like being able to see waves on the ocean, and yet also that the whole thing is made of water and intimately connected. No wave would ever be fooled into thinking that one wave was watching, controlling, or isolated from another. The Nirmanakaya teachings point to the aspect of integrated manifestation to do with personality, habits, and issues of character. Don't imagine that just by understanding the full ultimate truth of phenomena that these things will somehow lose their considerable causal inertia. To paraphrase Shinul, the great Korean Chan monk, that because the sun is shining brightly doesn't mean that all the snow will instantly melt. On a related theme, the Nirmanakaya also relates to the facts of the physiological inertia and biological conditioning of the bodily aspects of emotional life. The mind of an Arhat is extremely resilient